Breaking news. Leader of the failed Wagner mutiny, exiled Prigozhin, has returned to Russia. Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of the Wagner group who was exiled after a failed mutiny, has returned to Russia. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, who mediated an agreement last month, told reporters on Thursday, as for Prigozhin, he's in St. Petersburg. He is not physically present in Belarus. On June 27, Lukashenko announced that Prigozhin had arrived in Belarus as promised in the agreement. Vladimir Putin's security officials have previously stated that they have opened a criminal investigation into the alleged incitement of armed mutiny by the head of the country's mercenary forces. On June 27, Lukashenko announced that, per the terms of the agreement, Prigozhin had arrived in Belarus. As for Prigozhin, he is in St. Petersburg, he told reporters on Thursday. He is not physically present in Belarus. Is there evidence that Ukraine has made progress against Russia? Vladimir Putin was deceived by the defense ministry, according to Yevgeny Prigozhin's explosive rant on Telegram, in which he vowed to stop the evil of the Kremlin's top brass for destroying his fighters and concocting lies to justify invading Ukraine. According to Moscow's Interfax news agency, which cited comments from Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, necessary measures are being taken after the Russian president was briefed. Private military contractor Wagner is headed by a multimillionaire who has accused his government of trying to deceive society and Mr. Putin by making up allegations of Ukrainian aggression. The largest nuclear plant in Europe is the target of mutual accusations between Ukraine and Russia. Putin's General Armageddon, according to the UK Ministry of Defence, has been missing for more than 10 days. According to Zelensky, Russian forces have placed explosive-looking objects on the roof of the nuclear power plant. Russia's serious resistance on the battlefield against Ukraine. Putin says the country is united days after a mutiny. There are significant weaknesses in Putin's armed forces. Lukashenko, leader of Belarus, says Prigozhin has returned to Russia at 8:59, Eleanor Noyce. In a statement released on Thursday, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko said that Russian mercenary leader Yevgeny Prigozhin had left the country. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been going on for 16 months, but the country is finally pushing back with a long-awaited counteroffensive, and it's made some progress so far. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky congratulated the country's armed forces on Monday, the 26th of June, after spending the day presenting awards to frontline soldiers in the east and south. Today, our troops advanced in every front. Mr. Zelensky said as much in his evening video address, which he gave from a moving train after visiting 2 battle zones. After a year, the special military operation, launched by Russia against Ukraine, has resulted in millions of innocent Ukrainians being uprooted from their homes and lives. Russia's President Vladimir Putin started the war with the false claim that Russia's neighbor needed to be demilitarized and denazified, using this as an excuse to seize territory from a sovereign nation whose President Volodymyr Zelensky happens to be Jewish. Ukraine has defied the odds by fighting back against Russian aggression and defending itself from Russian onslaughts with the help of Western military aid, despite Mr. Putin's irrational desire to reclaim territory lost to Moscow after the fall of the Soviet Union. At least 4 people were killed on Thursday when a Russian missile strike on the western Ukrainian city of Lviv caused the most damage to civilian infrastructure since Russia's full-scale invasion. Parts of the roof and upper floors of buildings were destroyed, windows were smashed, and rescuers were searching through the debris for survivors in a 1-minute video posted online by President Volodymyr Zelensky. He predicted that there would be a reply. There are casualties and fatalities. Zelensky expressed his sorrow to the families via the messaging service Telegram. The enemy will receive a response, that much is certain. It's going to be a big one. The aftermath of a Russian missile attack on Lviv, which at least 4 people died in, was captured on devastating drone footage. Ukraine's Interior Minister Ihor Klimenko said today that 9 other people were injured in an attack overnight. Lviv's mayor, Andriy Sadovy, estimated that 50 homes and 60 vehicles were damaged by the strike. Volodymyr Zelensky's drone footage reveals widespread destruction to buildings on the third and fourth floors. Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have fled to this city from the east, and emergency services have been searching the rubble for survivors. According to a translated excerpt from an interview with CNN, Volodymyr Zelensky expressed regret that a counteroffensive hadn't begun sooner and requested weaponry from Western allies. He was quoted as saying, "I'm grateful to the United States as the leaders of our support, but I told them and the leaders of Europe that we would like to start our counteroffensive earlier and that we need all the weapons and materiel for that. Why? Because getting started later will make progress slower." Human Rights Watch urges Ukraine and Russia to end their use of cluster bombs. Human Rights Watch reported today that both Russian and Ukrainian forces had used cluster munitions, resulting in the deaths of Ukrainian civilians. The international lobbying group has demanded that Russia and Ukraine cease their use of the weapons and has urged the United States to stop providing them. Human Rights Watch, citing interviews with more than 100 residents, witnesses, and local emergency personnel, has concluded that Ukraine fired cluster munition rockets into Russian-controlled areas in and around the eastern Ukrainian city of Izium last year, following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Human Rights Watch reports that at least 8 civilians were killed and 15 more were injured in the Ukrainian attacks on Izium. Cluster bombs have been used by both sides in the conflict in Ukraine. The Human Rights Council of the United Nations has documented the deaths of numerous civilians as a result of Russia's use of these weapons. The weapons, which disperse a large number of smaller bomblets over a wide area and can kill or maim unwary civilians months or years later, have been banned by more than 120 countries. All three major powers have rejected the treaty: Russia, Ukraine, and the United States. Ukraine will give Russia strong response, according to Volodymyr Zelensky. Russia launched an overnight attack on Lviv, resulting in the deaths of 4 people. Lviv. Russian terrorists' nighttime attack had dire repercussions. There are casualties and deaths. I'm sorry for the family's loss. The enemy will undoubtedly receive a retaliatory response. He described it as a strong one this morning. Former Vice President Mike Pence has claimed that former President Donald Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis do not understand the full scope of their call for restricted military aid to Ukraine. Mr. Pence, who is competing with his White House boss and Mr. DeSantis for the 2024 Republican presidential nomination, said during an interview before a campaign event in Sioux City, "With all due respect, I just don't think the former president and the governor of Florida just don't understand Americans' national interest in supporting the Ukrainian military in repelling the Russian military in Ukraine." Mr. Pence, who just returned from a trip to Ukraine, warned, "Make no mistake, China is watching." The mayor of Lviv, Ukraine, reports that 3 people were killed and many more were injured in a Russian missile attack. According to Mayor Andriy Sadovy, roughly 60 dwellings and 50 vehicles were damaged by the strike. As Thursday dawns, rescuers scour the rubble for signs of additional survivors. Russian state television criticized exiled mercenary leader Yevgeny Prigozhin for his role in a failed armed uprising last month and claimed that an investigation into the incident was still ongoing. On Wednesday night, the state-run Rossiya 1 TV channel aired a program called 60 Minutes that featured what was claimed to be exclusive footage shot during law enforcement raids of Mr. Prigozhin's office in St. Petersburg and one of his estates in that city. Host lawmaker Yevgeny Popov called Mr. Prigozhin a traitor, and journalist Eduard Petrov was on the show to present the footage as evidence of the Wagner chief's criminal past and hypocrisy in calling out corruption in the armed forces. Videos surfaced online purporting to show Wagner bludgeoning traitors to death with a sledgehammer, and the footage showed boxes full of high-denomination rubles in his office and bundles of dollars in his luxurious residence, as well as what was called his personal helicopter, an arms cache, a collection of wigs, a fully equipped medical treatment room, and a collection of souvenir sledgehammers. No one intended for this case to be resolved. Mr. Petrov said that the investigation was still ongoing, but that they had already deduced that the video Mr. Prigozhin used to justify the mutiny, which purported to show a Russian strike on a camp of mercenaries, was fake. Russian law enforcement officers armed with firearms were shown entering Prigozhin's office. Petrov said, "I consider that media fed by Yevgeny Prigozhin was all responsible for creating Yevgeny Prigozhin's image as a people's hero." This was in reference to media outlets that Prigozhin had financially supported. They shut down and ran as soon as it failed. On June 24, the leader of the Wagner mercenary group stormed the city of Rostov-on-Don in southern Russia.